Today I'm using ink blending to create a soft and serene project. Hello there, Michelle Shorts here with Terrific Tags with Michelle. I'm here on the Altenew YouTube channel twice a month, so if you enjoy my videos I'd love for you to subscribe. So let's get started. I'm using the Crafty Flower Crocus layering die set today. There are 3 flowers in the set, open one, a partially closed one and then a bud as well. I'm just using the partially open one and the bud today. I wanted to bring in my inspiration card. This is the card that I made for the release and I really love how it turned out. I think it's really nice and kind of soft and calming. So I thought it'd be quite nice to create a coordinating tag to go with it. I have die cut the elements from Classic Crest 110 Solar White cardstock. I can now add some ink blending onto the petal pieces. I'm using a mini blending brush and Enchanted Garden Fresh dye inks. These are my absolute favourite purple inks. They are on the kind of more blue toned purple, but I thought that they would work really nice for kind of a more calming card. I do tend to think that purple is like a calming colour, and what's great is that Crocus already do come in purple, so that was quite helpful. So I'm starting off by adding the lightest shade, which is Wisteria, to the tops of these petals. I want it to kind of fade down to the white of the cardstock. I thought that that would add to the kind of softness of these flowers. So I'm starting off at the top of the petals and then I release the pressure on my brush a little bit to kind of fade down to the white of the cardstock. I can then go in with Hydrangea ink, which is the second lightest in the collection. And I can add that again towards the tips of these petals. This was a little bit darker than I wanted it to be initially, so I kind of removed a little bit off of the brush onto my mat, and then I can go back in and blend that colour a little bit. And I am going to fade it down a little bit again towards the bottom of the petals, but I'm not going to go as far as that lightest shade. And I am just using the 3 lightest shades from the collection. I felt that the darkest shade was probably a little bit too dark for what I needed. So I can now go in with ultraviolet, and I'm just going to add a very tiny amount of this to the tips of these petals. But I do need to remember that these inks do dry a little bit lighter. So if I feel like it's a little bit too dark, that's okay, because then once it dries, it will probably be the shade that I want it to be. Or the saturation of colour, I suppose. This piece here is actually going to get completely covered up by the next layer, but I wanted to make sure that I did add a little bit of ink blending to it. In case I don't line up the layers perfectly that's on top of it, you're not going to be able to see the white of the cardstock because I've got that ink blending there. I am holding down these pieces onto my sticky mat. Now ordinarily they would stick down perfectly without me holding them, but my sticky mat is a little bit on the unsticky side. I do just need to run it under some water and let it dry and it will become sticky again. I do just need to do that occasionally because, as you can see from the staining on my mat, I do use this a lot. So I can now go in with the stamens, and I'm using the Golden Sunset Fresh Dye Ink collection. So I started off with Sunray. I can now go in and add a little bit of chamomile. And then I can finish off with Snapdragon. And for this piece here on the right hand side, for my card, I didn't add the darkness towards the tips of this piece and I kind of regretted it, so I wanted to make sure that I did that for this tag. For the leaves, I'm using the Green Valley Fresh Dye Ink collection. I can start off with the lightest shade Firefly and add that kind of like as a base layer onto these leaves. But again, I am focusing the colour kind of on one side, so this will be the bottom of the leaves. And I do just want to add a little bit onto the stem of that flower piece there as well. And I do find that it's kind of easier for me to have die cuts in kind of weird sort of orientations on my mat because I'm ink blending with my right hand. It's just easier for me to add that darker saturation on the right hand side, so it does look a little bit odd that these leaves are kind of upside down, but I just find it a little bit easier for me to do that. I can now adhere all of the pieces together to create the flowers. The great thing about these dies is that they have got that keyhole here at the bottom. So I can just line up the kind of second layer on top of the first layer, lining up that keyhole there. I'm using liquid glue here to adhere the pieces together so that if I don't accidentally adhere them perfectly, I've got that kind of wiggle time to pop them in place. And I am using the back of the packaging to help me out with the layers, but as you might be able to see on these ones here in particular, that when you die cut them, it does actually indent the number. So you start off with 1 at the bottom and then add like the 2, the 3, the 4 on top of each other. And so that then the last piece here just covers those up. So it's a really great way to know how to layer all of these die cuts together. But like I say, the back of the packaging helps too. And for this piece here, there is no keyhole system, but it's pretty self-explanatory. I'm just going to lay this piece here onto the base layer. Trying to just wiggle it in place to line it up. And then I've just got this layer here on top. So this one's really easy to layer up. And then I realised at this point that I didn't add any green to that stem, so I'm just going back in with the residual ink on my brush just to add a little bit of that to the bottom. I have cut a tag using the Terrific Tags die set from Classic Crest £110 Solar White cardstock. I'm now going in with a small blending brush and I'm adding the lightest shade that I used on the flowers, the wisteria colour. And I'm adding that towards the bottom left hand corner. Now my tag is upside down here because, like I say, I want the darkest colour to be where my kind of right hand is. Although I am actually ambidextrous, I do always do my ink blending with my right hand, so I just find it easier sometimes to ink blend upside down. Just figuring out here how far up I want that ink blending to be. I originally thought that I might bring in the second lightest shade, that hydrangea, but I decided that I did want to keep this really quite nice and pale. I wanted it to look a little bit like there were some maybe other crocuses in the background, so I wanted them to kind of look a little bit off focus, I suppose, and so that's why I wanted to add this ink blending. I'm adding a little bit of water onto my craft mat here, and then I can bring in the tag, pick up that water with a brush, and then I can splatter that onto the ink. And this is going to react with the ink and leave some kind of like water kind of droplets onto it. I think it's a really great way to kind of break up a little bit of ink blending, and like I say, because I want it to kind of look a little bit like there are more crocus in the background, I want them to not be in focus, and this is a great way to do that. I am being careful here not to add too much water to this tag because it is just regular cardstock, not watercolour cardstock, but it's absolutely fine if you don't add too much. And you can kind of see here in the bottom left hand corner that I think works really nicely, just having that kind of mottled look to the ink blending. I can now start adhering everything onto my tag. So I've added a little bit of liquid glue onto the back of these leaves here, and I'm using the crocus there as a placeholder so I can figure out where I want these leaves to go first. And then because there isn't too much variety of these leaves, I thought it'd be quite nice to cut this leaf in half so that I've kind of got like a whole separate leaf that doesn't look the same as the one that I just adhered down. So I'm kind of figuring out a little arrangement here. I thought it'd be quite nice to have this bud kind of coming up between those leaves. So once I'm happy, I can add some liquid glue onto the back of this leaf piece here. And I did struggle a little bit to try and get it underneath this bud, but I did really want to try and keep this bud in place so that I knew exactly where it was going to end up. I can then add a little bit more liquid glue onto the stem of this crocus here, and I'm just adding the adhesive onto the bottom because I thought it'd be quite nice to pop another leaf just behind that top piece there. I can then add a little bit of instant dimension foam tape behind the top of that flower, just to raise it up a little bit, add a little bit of dimension onto this tag. I can then add some more instant dimension foam tape onto the top of this crocus here. I've already added a little bit of liquid glue onto the stem, and now I can remove the backings off of that foam tape, and I did struggle a little bit here. Sometimes I find them really easy to lift off, other times it's just one of those days where everything tends to go a little bit wrong. So I can now pop that in place, and I am going to overhang it slightly onto the tag. I just really like that look. I think it just adds a little bit extra interest onto a clean and simple project. So just pressing that stem down there to make sure that that glue is going to dry nicely. And I messed up here. I should have cut each of the leaves and the stem separately from the bottom of this tag, but I decided to try and do it all in one go, and it was a little bit too thick, so I messed up and kind of damaged the bottom of these leaves and stems here. I thought I might be able to rescue it by pressing those down with my bone folder, but in the end I did have to take it to my guillotine and just cut the bottom off. It's not ideal because I do lose that kind of nice rounded edge of the tag, but at least I didn't mess up and have to redo the whole tag. I'm now adding a couple of extra leaves here just to fill out the bottom a little bit. So just popping those in place, and this time I can cut off the excess with the scissors without any issue because I've only got the one layer of the cardstock. And I do tend to find that it's a little bit easier to cut those from the back of the tag rather than the front, just so I can use the edge of the tag as a guide. I've then die cut another of the tags, and I'm adding some glue tape onto the back of that so that I can sandwich it onto the back of the tag with the crocus on. Ordinarily, when I tend to line things up, I tend to line things from the bottom, but I completely forgot here that I cut a little bit of that tag off the bottom, so I'm going to try and line it up from the top. The great thing about this adhesive is you do have a little bit of time to move things about before it sticks down really nicely. So just aligning those two up, and then I can cut off the bottom of that tag as well. I have stamped and heat embossed a sentiment from the Builder Garden Dreamy Dahlias stamp set. It's an absolutely beautiful set, but I really love the sentiments in it as well as the image. So I stamped one of those onto some black cardstock and heat embossed that. And I wanted this to be completely flat against the tag, but I've got different layers of those flowers there, so I did just add a little bit of extra cardstock onto the left hand side so that it kind of made it level. I've now got some black twine and I've popped that through the whole of the tag, and then I can tie that in a bow at the front. And I did just want to add the black twine here because it does bring in the colour of the black for the sentiments. It's quite nice just to coordinate everything. So I can just fiddle with that bow a little bit, get it to where I want it to be. And then once I'm happy, I can cut those tails down with some scissors. And then I do just tend to manipulate it a little bit just to get it to go in the direction that I want it to be. And then to finish off, I can add some amethyst gem sparkles. These are absolutely beautiful. They are a little bit more on the red toned purple side than the inks that I used, but I still think that they work quite nicely together. So just figuring out here the placement of these gems. So I've added two there on the left hand side. I can add another one here, and then I did decide to add another one at the top, and I struggled a little bit because I don't like particularly adding embellishments in even numbers, but I couldn't figure out where I wanted another one to go, but I still felt that I really wanted another gem at the top there. So I've just got to live with myself the fact that there's only 4 on here and not 5. But I really love how the tag turned out. I think it's a really nice accompaniment to the card that I made, and I really love that kind of soft and serene look. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description bar on YouTube and also over on the Altenew blog. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Hey there, Lydia here. I really do hope that you've just enjoyed the video. If so, please subscribe to the Altenew YouTube channel. Also, turn on the notification bell so you can get your daily dose of crafty techniques and tutorials just like this. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.